Hi, welcome to part 6 of the Shuswap Needle Arts Guild virtual workshop on wool applique and embroidery. I'm Leah Cuthbert. I'm so glad you're back, that you stuck with it. We're finally at part 6. Well, it's going to be part 6 and part 6A. I'll explain that in a second. But where we're at is the trivet. We finally made it to the trivet, and that's what this part 6 is all about. The new stitches and putting this little tiny thing together. You're going to use a lot of the skills that you acquired making the paperweight pin cushions. So a lot of those stitches are going to be the same. Finishing is going to be kind of the same, except for the back is round on this one, and of course the obvious is the back is square on this one, but other than that it's going to be pretty close. So in part 6, the reason I'm dividing it into 2 parts is because this is going to be long. This is going to be a long haul, and I want you to be able to sort of get a break and get up and do something else and then come back. And of course, having said that, you could always just hit pause and do that too. But I'm just going to go over what we're going to do in part 6A. So I'm going to cover off the supplies that you're going to need. We're going to cover the wrapped blanket stitch, then we'll move on to the wrapped running stitch, from there to the fly stitch, which I know we covered a little bit on the pin cushion, but I'm going to do a little bit of it again. Then the bullion stitch, and we're going to finish part A up with the double lazy daisy stitch. And what I'm going to do, for those of you that are going, oh no, where am I going to find these? I'm going to put in the description below the time stamp of where I start each of these stitches, so they'll be easier for you to find. And yeah, let's get started. Before I get in even closer than I am now, I just want to show you quickly what's on the table around me. I'm using size 5 pearl cotton for this example because I think the stitches show up better, and you'll be able to see what I'm doing a little bit better than if I use size 8. But I do have some size 8 with me that I'm going to be doing a few stitches just for comparison, so you can see the difference of one thickness to the other in a side-by-side stitch test. I've got size 3 milliner's needles, and they work for the size 5 and for the size 8 pearl cotton. The thing to know about them is every brand is a little bit different, and it's really frustrating. But for example, these Bowen size 3 millimeter needles I find are a little bit smaller than, say, the Sue Spargo brand, which I'm not sure which brand Sue Spargo is putting her name over the top of, but they just seem bigger to me. Anyways, moving on. I've got, of course, the trivet that I made so that I can point out where I've done things. I've also got another trivet ready that has no stitches on it, so that I can demonstrate some of the stitches actually on the flower or on the flower center. And oh, and the other thing that I have that's kind of important is this is from your pattern. This is page 7, and it's got the flowers and the different stitches I used on them. Now, in the case of my new working piece, where it says blue flower, orange flower, green, purple, I mean, I do have an orange, a blue, and an orange, a blue, and a yellow, but I don't have a purple flower. So I may not be doing them in the order that this list says that I will, because I'm a rebel. Okay, I'm not very organized. That's more to the point. So anyways, this is important if you want to kind of tick off the list. Okay, she showed me this one and this one and this one. It's also to remind me the ones that I'm supposed to show you. That's the big issue. And then I've got my practice piece here, and this is a piece of wool that from a wool coat that I dyed orange, and I have a ridiculous amount of this color of orange, and yeah, this seems like a good use for it. It's just off to the side here I have another even bigger piece, and I've got more in my other room. So yeah, that's the only reason I picked this. Also too, I tried to pick threads that would show up on the so you could see them while I'm filming. So that's what I've got. Now I'm going to get in even closer, and let's start stitching. Promised but not delivered in part 5 was the woven blanket stitch. So I've got my blanket stitch around the outside of my trivet, and you would do this, of course, at about this point when you've got it all put together. So really the biggest trick is burying your knot and getting in between your backing fabric and your blanket stitch. So I'm just going to bury that in there, have it come up a little ways beyond, and pull it through, and I put a little knot on the end of this, and I've decided I don't want it, so I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm going to pull that just until it disappears. Now I've got, I don't know, it's about 3/4 of an inch, maybe a whole inch of from where my tail went in to where I came out. So I'm not worried that this tail is gonna come out. I think it's far enough back. So in terms of the weaving, what I do is I go over top of this stitch, and then it's just an overcast stitch underneath and the next one, and then back over. So it's just that over and under all the way around. You could do all sorts of fancy schmancy things, but this is just your basic woven blanket stitch. Adds just a little bit of color. You may want to do it with maybe a size 5 or like a full 6 strands of embroidery floss. If you like, it's just however you want it to turn out, and however you want your edge to show up. You know, you may be happy with it with no weaving. So there it is, as promised. Finally, the woven blanket stitch. It's kind of underwhelming, isn't it? Well, let's move on. Hi, I came back. On the topic of the wrapped blanket stitch, I just wanted to show you something else. Where before, or on the outside of our trivet, sorry, I showed you how to wrap it over, and around this bar, this main bar here, and how I just went over and under. Well, you can get another kind of an interesting effect if you wrap around this bar right here instead of the flat bar. So I'm going to just show you what I mean by that. So I've done the blanket stitch in a couple of different ways around here. This first one is closer to what I did around the edge of the trivet, or what I did around the edge of the flower to hold it down with a blanket stitch. So where your stitch is actually off, it's in this background fabric, and then it's onto the applique fabric. And then I did the blanket stitch so that everything about it is on the applique fabric. So it's not touching the back here. And the reason I did that was I wanted to make sure this back line will show up. So I just want to show you, let's look together at what this is going to look like. So I'm going to just come up here. And what I want to do is, and I'm using the back end of my needle, I want to wrap, I'm going to run my wrap through here, right through there, and pull it through. And then I'm going to do that with the next one. And I'm going to pull that through. And you can see how this thread is on the inside of this thread. So let's just snug that one up and do that again. So I'm just going to run it along. And when I said on the inside, you can see that if I pull this through, my needle's on the top of this thread. I don't want that. I want my needle, I mean, you could do that, but you would get a different stitch. I want this thread to be over top of my needle. I want it going underneath that and pulling through. Now, I just want to show you on here, it's hard to see, but it makes a little chain stitch. Now if I pop over onto this straight bit of blanket stitch that I have conveniently left right here. I'm going to do it again. Now this is a size 5 pearl cotton and I'm using a size 3, so the comparison is a little rough based on that, but I'm just going to do the same thing and keep my loop on this side and work my way along. Pull it in. So you can kind of see how it looks like a little chain stitch all the way up the side. It looks kind of neat. I want to show you wrapping now when the entire stitch, so you can see the whole stitch. Why I insist upon doing it on this edge is beyond me, because really you could do this stitch just along a seam line if you'd like as well, but here we are. Now I know the white is reflecting, so I'm trying to get it to not, so hopefully you'll be able to see to not reflect. But here we go. So we're going to come over this one, and through and do it again. I'm going to do it for 4 stitches here. Okay, so if I put that up, and it sure does reflect the light, doesn't it? What I'm trying to do is, there we go, is get it so you can kind of see what's going on with the chain stitch along there. Now, if you sort of picture yourself wanting to build off of this stitch, which is kind of what crazy quilting is about, is you start with one stitch and then you add to it and you add to it again. What you could do, let me pull that one through and finish that, is you can see how these are like little stems here, and then this is like kind of, I don't know, little leaves at the bottom, or other little flowers at the bottom if you had used a different color. And then you can do up here, of course, anything you want off the top of this little piece. So, for example, you could just throw a lazy daisy stitch or 3. I'm just going to put 1 off the top of that. And it looks a little weird, but by the time you're done with it, it will look fabulous. So let's see if I can block that, make it a little less bright, so you can kind of hopefully see what I mean. So wrapping stitches it's an easy way to sort of dress up any other rather plain stitch, or if you're feeling it looks like it needs a little bit more, try wrapping. So now, speaking of wrapping, we're going to move on to the wrapped running stitch. Before you can have a wrapped running stitch, you need a running stitch. So I'm going to quickly put that in there. I'm doing it by rocking the thread on and off my needle. I'm trying to get the same amount of space between each stitch as I get, so on the fabric as between the fabric. Let me pull that through and clarify. So I'm trying to have my stitches be having this distance be the same as this distance. And you can tell by this example I'm not really succeeding at it, but that's because I'm rushing. And the other thing is that really you can do it any way you want. The reason I pointed that sort of evenness out is that if you're going to have your work judged, I guess, in one way or the other, it used to be, maybe that's just old school, we used to just be told, try to have this distance and this distance be the same. And now I leave it up to you. So I'm just going to kind of run along here a little bit more. And the other thing is that this is a quick way to do it. I can be more accurate in my case if I do the stick and stab, whereas if I go down and then back up again. And then back down again. And then back up again. So there you go. You can do it whatever works best for your hands and your fingers. So there is the running stitch. I'm going to show you a quick wrap of that stitch. I'll use a different color. I've got some green over here. So I'm just going to start, and I'm going to do an overcast wrap, which is what I kind of just showed you with the blanket stitch actually. So same deal, just over the stitch and then over this stitch. So it's everything is going from this direction. So that way. If you're left-handed, it would probably go that way. It doesn't really matter which direction you go, just be consistent. Just make sure that you're doing each stitch in the same direction. And there you go. That's what you end up with. Now I'm going to just carry on and do it a little bit more, or am I? You know what? I'm not. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to just show you a different wrap. And where with this part here, we went over and under in the same direction. In this section, what I want to show you, this little bit, is that we're going to weave under. We kind of did an over and under here. Now we're just going to go under and then under this way. And then back under. So we're approaching it from both sides. We're going under this way, and then we're going under this way. But we're not going over, just under that bar. Now let's get to the end of this. Okay, so maybe if I turn it this way and bring it up. So you can kind of see the difference between the two when you do it that way, with the over and under and then just the in and out. Now here's the thing. When you want to build on that, this to me looks pretty plain. But it's got its place depending upon what you're working on. But if you now head back in the other direction and weave it the same way, just stay under the bar, just under that bar. Hang on, get my slippery fingers out of the way. And over here under that bar. And here. I'm going to get myself back down to where I started with just this kind of flat in and out weaving. Okay. Now, again, I rushed, but you can see what that looked like. It's like a little chain stitch with kind of a neat little tacking stitch in the middle of it. It's a quick and easy way to dress that up. But let's take this one step further and carry on with the overhand wrap, which is what we were doing in this part here. And so to do that, we need to come over this way. I'm getting my needle ready to poke through, and not the needle end, the blunt end, sorry. Okay, so I'm going over this way, so I'm crossing over it this way. And then I'm going, so basically you can see, maybe you can't, my thread has come out from under this one, this side. It's going up and over like this, and under from this side. And then that's what we're going to do, is we're going to cross over and under. So it's exactly the way we did it when we started, or we did it when I started. I'm flipping around with this yarn, sorry. Where I would go over and under, and I only approached it from one side, going one direction. So that's what I'm doing. Stick with the one direction, over, and then one direction. And let's do it again, because I've got enough room to do one more. And then I'll park that needle. And so let's bring this up so you can see it. So you can see that if it's a flat weave, in and out, keeping your thread underneath the running stitch the whole time, you can end up with kind of a wavy kind of a look, and then you can turn it into a chain if you'd like. If you go with wrapping it over and going in from only one direction under the running stitch, but in the same direction every time, and then you go back on it, you can get an X kind of a look. Let me just turn this around because I've been messing with this for numerous shots over the last week. I'm going to turn this around and get this out of the way and just show you here with when I used two colors to wrap it, the X looks kind of neat, doesn't it? You know, and just make sure that you're wrapping over, and for the whole distance that you're going in, you wrap over and go under this in the same direction. And then and I did the same here, pardon me, here. This one is when you wrap under or weave under. You go under this one and out this way, and then under this one and under this one. So you're never crossing over, and then you get this look, or you get kind of a nice little snaky end to it right here. So there you go, different things that you can do with the running stitch. Back at the trivet, what I was wondering in my mind was if I doubled up my size 8 pearl cotton. This is a Valdani size 8 pearl cotton that I'm going to double it up to see if I can make that thicker. I wondered if it might by chance be a little thinner than the pearl cotton, the DMC pearl cotton size 8. And you know what, I don't think that it actually really is, but because I've got it loaded up on my needle, I'm going with it anyways. And I guess I'm going to put it around the outside of this red flower. So I'm going to start at the back just like we did last time with our pin cushions, and put a quick knot in there by just doing a tiny stitch on the back, and preferably not catching any tail that I'd left, but too late now. And I'm just going to give that a tug. It's not going anywhere. Okay, so running stitch around the outside. So what I do is I stay off the flower itself, and just try to get my running stitch to be right up against the side of the applique fabric as we go around like this. Oh, sorry, off the screen. Okay, here we go. So right up against, put my needle right up against the side that the edge of the applique fabric, and then come back up this way. Sorry, I'm knocking everything. Okay, let's just pull that, because look, there's an interesting, when you look at it close, you can kind of see that there's two threads there, but then I'm going to wrap this, so that's not going to show up. And then here we go. Just, I've come in awfully close with this part, just because I really want you to be able to see what I'm doing, but maybe I may be too close. Okay, so there it is, running stitch along the edge. We'll continue our way around. Made it around the flower. So now's the wrapping portion. So I'm just going to come up in between this stitch and this stitch along the edge, this stitch and this stitch along the edge of the flower. And I'm going to turn my needle around. I'm using the size 5 pearl cotton just to compare and contrast. I'm going to go under, and it doesn't, I think like I mentioned before, is that it doesn't matter which direction you do your over and under in it. What you want to do is be consistent. And this is another thing about doubling your thread, is that I only caught one. So I want to catch both my threads. So if you're doubling your thread, if you're doubling your thread, try to catch them both. And I'm doing it from the inside of the flower out. That's the direction I'm doing it, but you can absolutely do this the other way. But now that I've started from the inside out, I should finish that way. So you can see that by doing this, the only thing that's anchoring this green thread to to the background is the wrap itself. I'm not digging into this bottom bit at all. I'm just gliding along the surface of it. There we go. Okay, so I'll finish this and I'll be right back. I'm not quite done, but I've made it pretty much to the end of my thread. So when you're going to finish one of these wraps, this is how I do that. I'm going to kind of move as if to do the motion I was doing before, so from the inside of the flower out, so I'm going to cross over this one, and then I'm just going to go down and right through the fabric, and in the middle of the next stitch, just like that, just so that when I start, I'm also going to start there too. So I will get that ready, and so I've added more thread. I've attached it on the back here, and I'm going to just come up right where I went down when I ran out, right in there. Can you oh, you know, I'm wondering if I'm making this too blurry. Darn it. Well, I'll carry on and pretend that I'm not. Okay. And then I'll check it. And then just carry on with the wrapping. And I've got about 4 more to go. So I'll just get that done. Get into there, this last one. And then I want to finish where I came up when I started. So I came up here, so that's where I'm going to finish my thread. And I go back through right there. So there we go. That's wrapped with a double of the yellow being the double of the size 8 pearl cotton and the green being the size 5. And here's another one that is all just with size 8 pearl cotton. So you can decide. Fly stitch. So on the pincushion paperweight version, you can see a fly stitch all the way around the outside. This is a combination of a fly stitch and a straight stitch, so I used fly stitch there. Again, I put it on the paperweight and ran it around like a vine around the whole thing. On the trivet, I used it again as a sort of a fake leaf effect. So you can see it's around this one, and I used it again on the blue flower in the same place, the combination of the fly stitch and the straight stitch. And then over here on the yellow flower, I did the fly stitch as well, only I did it reversed, so that I ended up with this nice kind of zigzaggy-ish feature on the yellow flower. Run out of words. So just a quick rehash of the fly stitch, and then we'll carry on. I've got my thread and my needle. I did a little bit of it over here, but I'm going to do it again. You're never probably going to see this to see how this turned out. So fly stitch, I think that I am going to, let's run it along the top here. Okay, so I'm up at the top of my sampler. Okay, so I've come out here, and what I want to do is I'm going down level to this stitch here. I'm going to go down and then come out in a V, which is kind of midway between the two. And then I want to make sure that my thread ends up underneath my needle. I'm going to pull it through and then just tack it down. Okay. So there it is, just a little fly stitch. Let's do another one, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up right beside where the other one left off. So right there. And go down at the same point, come up in the middle, and pull that through. And I wasn't right side by side, was I? There's a lot to be said for drawing a line. I'm a little bit lower. So you can do it that way. Oh, and then if you wanted to add a straight stitch to it for later, for a little stem, or just to have a little stick in there, or a toe, because this could be like a little bird's foot. You just come up in the middle, and I like to go down right at the end, right by that knot. And that's what you do. So the other way to do a fly stitch, I'm going to turn it around this way. I'm going to roll this up so I can grab it a little better. So it's based on the same, it's exactly the same. You know, you come up right here in your fabric, and then you're going to pick a spot for based on how wide you want your fly stitch to be. Then you're going to go down at that point, and then come up at the point that's in between this and this, but down here. Let's do that, pull that through. Now, when you tack this one down, you can either do it the way I did it over here, just snug the tacking piece right up tight, or you can also just make it a long one, because you might be able to use that, and I'll show you that as we do the fly stitch on our new piece. I'll show you what I mean by that. So yeah, you can give it a long stem, and if you do that, you can maybe train it. You can chain it together and make it look like a bit of a vine. And by that I mean, well, there's a couple ways to do it, and this is not my first favorite, but here it is anyways. Okay, so what I did here was I meant when I did this to actually have put my stitches up higher, like a little bit closer to the top here, so that I could have snugged this in and have my V end up there. But it didn't work. So I have a choice of connecting them with a straight stitch, which I could just come up here and go down there. Well, let's just do it so you can see what I mean. So I'm just going to come up at the base of the last stem, pull this through, and I can go down there. So that's one way to deal with it. It's not my favorite way to deal with it, and you can kind of see why. It's not really, when I do it, it ends up just being pretty obvious that I was repairing a mistake. Other people can do this pretty seamlessly, and so I would tell you to go right ahead and try, and you might be one of those people. And then if you are, you can show me how to do it. What I'm doing here is I'm just putting a straight stitch in that is supposed to resemble or equal the leg of the fly stitch that I kind of botched. Okay, so here it is, pretending that this is just seamlessly coming down off of this V, and then I want to go up higher. There we go. I want to be up higher up the stem, and then I want to pick the same spot on the other side, and then I'm going to come up at the base of that stem stitch right there and pull my needle through, and then add my longer stem on the bottom. So there you go. So I'm going to do the fly stitch on this orange flower, and I'm going to center it. I did do a bit of knotting on the back. I'm going to center it kind of in the middle of each of these petal outlines. I'm using a size 8 pearl cotton. It's not doubled. You can see that I've come out, I think that's probably about 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to do my best to make it even and do the same thing and come up on the edge of the purple flower center and pull that through. There we go. Now you could, if you wanted, because you can, the fly stitch, absolutely, if you wanted to make it longer, you could actually have it end in the middle here, and then you get a bit of decoration in the center. And in fact, you know what? I think I'm going to just do that for a change of pace, and we'll see what it looks like when I'm done. So let's just do that. It is going to use more. Well, it's probably going to use the same amount of thread. So, sorry, there's one, and I'm going to still stick with the same plan of having it be kind of in line with each of these petals. We'll see what it does in terms of evenness when I'm done. So I'm going to do one more. So try to pick a point that's the same height as where you came out of the fabric, and then go in and out at the edge. Yeah, you can kind of tell that I'm off, but that's all right. And my center's not necessarily center. I'm also going to not connect them exactly in the center, because I'm thinking I might throw some French knots in there to hide any kind of lack of evenness that I might be creating. And it's not a question of might, that I'm absolutely creating. So one more. Up, and then I think I want to try right there and come up in the center against the fabric I'm appliquing. Snug that up, and then I'm going to come down towards the center and pull through. So that's what I'm doing with the fly stitch on this one. It's not something that I did on the original, but it's an example of something that you can do yourself if you'd like to. So that's fly stitch. The next stitch we're going to do is the bullion knot stitch. Bullion knot, bullion stitch. That's what we're doing. Okay, so the bullion knot or stitch depends upon who's doing it and what they want to call it. I tend to default to the bullion knot, but I'm open to stitch people. So how you do that is let's come up in my fabric here, right there. Now, just like the French knot where you would come up and you would wrap your way around, 3 knots, and then you go straight back in. What the bullion knot does is it gives you multiple knots and wraps, so you can kind of see I've got it going on here as well. And you can use it as an edge stitch, or you can do a bullion rose. Look up a bullion rose on YouTube and just see what that looks like. Those are really cool, and they're actually pretty easy to construct once you get the initial bullion knot figured out. And that's what we're going to do right now. So come up in my fabric. I want to come down behind where I came up, and this would be then how long I want my bullion knot to be. So I've come up, okay, let's get back down here, and then I need to come up, bring my needle right up beside where I came out first. So I'll move that out of the way so you can see what I've done. So I've come up this way. Now I need to wrap my needle enough times that it's the length meets this length, because that's how long my stitch is going to be. And just kind of a general rule of thumb is to wrap it evenly, of course, and not too tight, because you're going to need to be able to slide your needle through. See here, I'll get that around there. But what you do is you wrap it enough times so that the amount of the wrapped area equals the amount on the needle. And some folks say that it's maybe a good idea to add even just 1 or 2 more stitches, wraps, beyond when you think you've got the right length. So That's what I did. And then you put your thumb on it, and I push the needle up. And what I've got to do is drag my needle through all of those wraps. And you can't see it because it's under my thumb. But I'm going to just kind of move it over so you can kind of see here what's happening. And what I want to do is just kind of tease it back down by pulling this thread so that it lies flat. And there it is. So you can see you kind of see what it looks like. Let's do another one. I'm going to just go down so I can head back up again, do it over. So that sort of completes the stitch right there. So I want to do another one about the same way I just did that one. So I'm coming up. Here's where I'm up. And I want to try and just make a little V. I'm going to put it right in here. Put my needle right in there. I'm going to come up next to the needle, or pardon me, up next to the thread. There we go. And then I'm going to wrap it. So, and I'm trying to keep my wraps even, but not too tight on the needle. So you got to have that sort of just sort of light hug, I guess is what you're looking for. Not one of those strangle hugs that, you know, old friends give you and that you give them because you haven't seen them for so long. Yeah, not one of those. Just a very light hug. And then we'll just pull the thread through. And I know it's under my thumb, but here, let's just risk it all and take it out. So I'm just going to try to grab the whole thing. I'm going to keep pulling on this thread until I can kind of yank her into submission. And there you go. There's another one. I'm going to do one more. I'm going to finish this off. We'll do one more, and then we'll get to it on our trivet. So same thing. I'm going to come up over here. Oh, pardon me, so you can see me. I'm going to come up here. I am, again, going to try to make it fit right in next to these two on an angle. So I've got my needle through the fabric. Now it's time to wrap it. Now let me just see how that looks. That's probably too many, but let's just do it anyways. Actually, you know what? Let's do a bunch, and then I can show you what happens then, because it's a different look. So I'm going to just throw a few more wraps on here. There we go. Okay, now I've got lots. So this is, if you look at what I've got in wraps in terms of what I've got in length, it's quite a bit more. So here we go. Hold it all down and pull it through, and I've got my tail coming out the other end, so I've got to just loosen that. It's something I should have checked before. I just got to get the right piece to loosen off. Pull it through. There we go. Set that free. Okay, so I've got my finger on the wraps, and I'm just going to do the same thing. Just pull it up tight, and you can't see it much when you look overhead, but when you look from the side, you can see that it's just slightly bowed there. It's kind of like a little caterpillar. People make bumblebees out of this. They'll do it in yellow and black and yellow and black. Of course, not like this. They'll it's kind of spread out. They'll just sort of stack them in a line. They actually look pretty cool. I'm just going to just show you this, and then so back to this. So this is one where I did multiple wraps, and you can see how it sticks off the thread. These other two are pretty close in length, and so they lie quite nice and flat. So that's how you do it. We're going to do it on the trivet now, and let's get over there. So I'm going to put a bullion stitch right here in between the two arms of this fly stitch. What I've done is I've got my needle coming out, and it appears appears to be kind of hard to see against the orange, but I have the needle coming out at about at a depth that I'd like to have my bullion knot be, the length of my bullion knot itself. So that might be a little ambitious on my part, but let's give it a try. So I'm going to pull this through, and then I want to come in right down here. And what I'm doing is I'm just catching this orange fabric. I'm not trying to catch down and catch this fabric as well, just because it gets too much bulk for me, for my liking there in the stitch itself. And then I'm coming up, hopefully you can see that, I'm coming up pretty much where I first came out. And I push my needle up so I've got enough that I can wrap. And now I'm going to wrap this thing, and hopefully I've learned my lesson, and I don't want to wrap it too tight, but I want it to be even, and I've got to make it be just a few wraps longer, pardon me, a few wraps longer than the length I'm trying to cover. Okay, let's try that. Let's try that and see how it looks. Okay, so I'm just holding it down with my thumb and fingernail against the needle and the background fabric, and I'm just going to pull it. I'm pulling it until it's kind of snug here, and then I'm going to grab it from the other end before it runs away on me and snug that up. There we go. You know, I really recommend that you type bullion stitch into YouTube and see how some other people do it, because I feel like I'm a little clumsy here. And then I want to finish off by pulling through here. So there you go. There it is. Do I dare try it again? I think I'm going to have to, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more opportunities. So let's do it one more time. Oops, so I'm going to try to come up in the center here, and clearly I missed it. I didn't. All right, so it's roughly in that center. I'll pull this up, and then I'm going to go down at the base of the fly stitch, come up to the end, right there where the thread initially came out. Okay, I'm going to press, I'm just going to grab it like this to see if I can do a better job of wrapping it. And so I'm going to wrap it until it is a few wraps beyond what I think the length is. And by length I mean the distance from here to here. And I think that's got it. So I'm going to squeeze that between my thumb and forefinger and pull it out. And here's something I can tell you, is I think, pardon me while I shuffle this all over the place, I think it's better if I kind of clasp it between the fabric and my thumb as opposed to pinching it. It seems to move more smoothly in my case, so that's how I'm doing it. That's why I've done the flip over mid stitch. So this is what I've got now. I still need to tighten this up, and I will tighten it up that way. And I've got a loose wrap at the bottom, but it seems to have snugged up a bit. So now I've just got to fasten this off underneath the fly stitch. Pull that up. Okay, so that's 2. I can see that what's happened here is that I've kind of overshadowed my fly stitch a little bit, and that might be something that we can throw another stitch at later on. So I'm just going to bullion stitch my way around here. We'll take another look at it, and then we'll move on to the next stitch after that. I'm back. I finished my bullion knot. I took a bit of a break there. The neighborhood channel was going pretty loud. We have grandkids visiting our neighbors, so there's a lot of fun happening over there, and there's some lawns being mowed. So, and I'm trying to sit outside because it's a warmish day. So yeah, you might hear the neighborhood in the background, but hopefully it won't be too disruptive. So meanwhile, back at the Trivet, I did finish the bullion knot on there, getting 6 of them done, and all I can say about what helped me get it done was that I didn't squeeze the wraps too tight between the fabric and my finger or between my fingers. That seemed to help. It also seemed to help to pull as snugly as you can the thread through those wraps until you absolutely can't, you know, pull it anymore, and then stretch it out to lay it down flat. So you may want to go back and see me do it, or as I suggested, you may actually do better by just Googling it and seeing what you find out on YouTube, because everybody does it a little differently, and somebody's example might speak to you better than mine does. So now we're going to move on. So moving on, I have been working away at the Lazy Daisy stitch, or the single Lazy Daisy stitch, or the lazy petal stitch. But anyways, I've been picking away at this on and off as a way to get around to showing you all how to do the double Lazy Daisy stitch. So what I thought I would do is just a very quick, here's the, if you'll recall, the single Lazy Daisy stitch. So I've come up with my thread here. I'm going to go down very close to that where I came out, and my needle is going up the length that I want my petal to be, and then I'm going to make sure that my thread is wrapped around behind that, and I'm going to pull it through. Okay, and then I'm going to finish it off. Now, in terms of, to just jump us ahead to the double Lazy Daisy stitch, there are choices, and I'm going to make this slightly long tack at the top. Normally, if I was going to tack this stitch, or tack my daisy down, hey, that sounds like a kind of like a country song. Tack my daisy down. Anyways, the night they tacked my daisy down. Oh, I digress. I'm sorry. So tacking right here. I would normally do it right there, right beside the end of the petal. In this case, I'm going to go out just a little bit further with an eye to doing the double Lazy Daisy stitch sooner than later. So here it is, and here's this one. You can see with this one that it does have the longer tacking stitch right here. Over here at this one, I've got a slightly longer one. These ones are closer to being just regular tacks. This one is very close to being a regular tack. So without further ado, on to the double Lazy Daisy. So where I'm going to start is, just to get away from this blue so it shows up more, I'm going to start over here. And I think, yes, I'm going to start on this one here. So I'm going to just turn this around. I'm going to put my needle into the fabric down by the base of this Lazy Daisy, and sorry I had to do it off screen. It was so I could see what I was doing. So the needle is right beside the base of this green petal. I'm going to pull that up and through. Now the trick with the double Lazy Daisy, of course, is so that you get two. You get two for the price of one. 2 threads in the one spot. So one way to do it is, because of having a slightly longer tack stitch here, you can, once you've come up out of your thread, you can just slide your needle, I'm using not the pointy end, through that tack stitch like that, and then take your thread right down to the bottom again. And again, I haven't come over. I'm coming down beside, and that's because I can see in the way that I built this lazy daisy stitch that you run, when you're doing it this way, you run the risk of your second petal slipping into the middle, and it just sort of crosses over, and it doesn't look terrible actually, but it doesn't, if you look closely at it, it doesn't necessarily look like what you probably had originally planned on. So I find that when and you can see how it's just wanted to cross over right there, when I stay just on the outside of the petal, I'm going to pull this up, so I'm just on the outside. It just seems to me like the thread wants to sit where I want it to sit a little better. But let's do it again. Let's do it on this yellow one, because it looks like I've got a big enough tack stitch that I can pull that off again. So here we go. What I'm going to do this time though is I'm going to get right down and right close. And if you look at right in here, see if I can poke my needle up right there, kind of right in there. See how kind of that's overlapped. The two threads of this yellow are kind of overlapped one over the other. That might not give me too much trouble. What I'm going to do is I've come up right at that point, which is different than the last one, I grant you. But I'm sort of, what I'm doing is I'm reading my stitches. I'm kind of trying to get them to do the best they can for me based on how I set them up. So same thing. I'm going to come up and I'm going to slide the dull bit of my needle through that way and pull that through. And then just as to further the experiment, I snug that up and I'm going to put it right down beside where I came out. I'll pull that through and let's just see. Let's see what happens here. And that's what happens. It quite literally it's pulled over top of the yellow stitch. It's kind of made it disappear. Now I think that probably you can mess with this and save it. I mean, there's two ways to save it. You can just pull it right out and do it again, or as I just did just there, as I got under this and I stretched it back, but it's loose on there now. So in order to make it at this juncture, to make it stay where I want it to stay, I'm going to do another tack stitch. And yes, it's going to end up being in the wrong color, and there's ways that you can put that on there so that it hides it. I'm not really working very hard at trying to hide it at this point in time. I couldn't tell you why. I guess a bad example is sometimes as useful as a good example. So I was able to tack it, and I was able to make it lie flat. But if you look up here, pardon me, up here at my tack stitches, it's gotten a little funky. So yeah, I think that with what I did here, where I started kind of down beside and up and over and ending kind of down beside, it sits better. It's like it's happier to live there. So, but the next way you can do this, and I'm going to do it on this yellow one here, and I'm going to follow the same idea. I'm going to try to be down, just down beside the bottom of the petal. And I'm going to come around with my thread. I'm looping my thread, and I'm going to put my needle down here beside, kind of beside at the bottom, and then I'm going to come up to the top with my needle, and I'm going to have it come out just right at that tack stitch, right there. I'm even coming through my tack stitch a little bit. So I'm going to pull that through and snug that up. And I've managed to double up my thread. Oh, there we go. Got that out of there. So so what I've done is basically it's just literally you do a double lazy daisy, and then you tack this green, mine's this teal color, you tack it into place. And I'm going to pull that all the way through. There we go. And then bring that up. So you can see I've got a tacking stitch here and a tacking stitch just beyond it. And that seems actually to make it all hold together a little bit better than weaving it through. I mean, this looks fine, so it works. So it's just a question of what works best for you and what kind of a look you're going for. I'm going to just do another one. Pardon me while I get my hand under there, and I'm going to do it next to this sort of emerald green, and I'm going to do it exactly the way I did it before. I'm coming down kind of beside the bottom of the petal, and I'm going to put my loop kind of up and forward under my thumb to get it ready. And then I'm going into my fabric. I'm going to come out right at the top of where that basting or tack stitch was. You see that? And then pull it through. I'm going to have to hold the flower. Sorry, get my thumb in the way. And then I'm going to tack it down and pull that up. So there you go, there's another one. So it's just a question of how you want it to look. For me, I think that if you're going to do it the way I just did it here, try to get, like, I feel like this tack stitch is maybe just a little too long. I like it when my tack stitches sort of they just bump right up against each other tightly, which is kind of more what I achieved here. It seems kind of less wonky. But I guess I've got more thread. I have more thread on this side than that side. I wonder if I took my needle here and just gave it a little tug. Oh, now I've got more thread on that side, on this side. So you can also play with these things a bit to get them to sit the way you'd like. So that is a double lazy daisy. Quick refresh on the single lazy daisy stitch, and let's move on, and I'll show you where I've put it on the trivet. So on this trivet, on the one that's finished, here it is here, you can see that, of course, the center, I've got two colors going on here where I did the double lazy daisy, and in this case I did it with the double tacking. I didn't wrap it through. And the same goes on all these little outside ones that I did. And you know what, these little outside ones that I did, the reason they only have a single tack is because they're actually single lazy daisies, not doubles. These ones I just went around the fly stitch. So I planted my single lazy daisy, just one around each arm of this fly stitch. That's what's going on there. So there you go, lazy daisy stitch. I did also, I did do it on here too, and I lost the clip. so you get to see it done like magic. So here it is here with two colors. It stands out a little bit better. Again, I did it with a double tack rather than weaving it through. And the reason I did that is that for me, I seem to have more control over it. You might have more control over it by weaving it through the top. So it's just a question of trying it out and seeing what you end up with. So double lazy daisy. So I'm back. Total chaos. This is what happens when you take your eye off the ball. I was trying to get 6 petals, and I just, you know, went on ahead and did 8. And I feel like this is just too crowded now to do a double lazy daisy on it. So I've moved over, and I'm going to attempt it again on this flower here, and see what we can do. And in this case, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do it with 4 petals. And then because of that, you won't have to wait so long. And I don't run the risk of screwing it up again, because 4 is relatively easy, touch wood, to do, to divide everything into quarters. So we'll just get those 4 down. Snug that one up a little tight. I'm going to just make it a bit bigger. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. Sorry, I'm off the screen again. Jeez. Jeez Louise, eh? That's... Okay. And last. All right, so we'll finish with that. Just gonna do a few little stitches on the back here to work as a knot. And we'll cut that off there. Flip it over, find it. Oh, there it is. And then we'll do I'll do a double stitch around it. And I'm going to use the same color that I used when I goofed it up the first time. Probably information you did not need to have, but you know, I share. Okay, so here we go. Just gonna come up in the middle. Now I didn't really change the size of my tack there. I could probably run the needle through that and then just come down here, but it's always been my intention that I would just do a second tack. So that's what I'm going to do here. Like that. And then tack that one down. I'll do another one. Oh, gotta find that middle point. And back into the middle point again and up just beyond the tip of the other daisy petal. Wrap it around. Pull it carefully, and then tack that one down. And that I pulled a little tight, but I was able to kind of tuck that back in, so that worked out okay. Let's just get one more going here. Well, actually, there's only 2 left, so I guess I'll torture you with both. I'll just do the whole thing. Okay, and then I'm going to tack that one down. Okay, and then last. Sorry, I'm flinging this all over the place. I'm trying to get a good hold of it. Okay, come out just beyond the tack from the purple petal. but not brutally out into the main flower itself. Just a hint of it out there, and tack that down. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Oh, now that's better. So that's what that looks like. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I'm going to put something in between these. I don't know what, but that's a double lazy daisy for you. Our next stitch is going to be the scroll stitch. So that was part A. We've covered off 5 different stitches, and hopefully I was useful. If I wasn't, you can feel free to email me, ask me any questions. I'll see what I can clarify for you, or point you to a book that you can maybe find the stitch in too. And that's it. We're going to move on to part 6B next. Just a little teaser. We're going to cover up the scroll stitch, the pistol stitch, the sunwheel stitch, the Pekingese stitch, the woven chain stitch, and then a little bit about how to put that trivet together that you've all been working on. So I'll see you in part 6B.